Another important component of successful visual design is consistency. And consistency is essentially what makes a system a system. It's what unifies all those disparate parts, those different screens, those different features, those different functions. It's what brings them together and enables us to perceive them as all being part of the same whole. Consistency in visual design allows us to build an accurate mental model of the way the site or the app or the system works. It allows us to, again, leverage our prior experience with other things to figure out how what's in front of us works. It also leads to reduced time and cost in terms of training and support. If my prior experience and subsequent knowledge allows me to sort of automatically grasp 60 to 70% of what's in front of me, that means that, someone has to spend a lot less time explaining to me how something works. And in terms of, formal training and support programs, those things cost organizations money. So if that doesn't have to happen, that can represent significant cost savings. If people can sort of get in and use the application quicker, that can be a very, very big benefit. The way you evaluate consistency is by asking some important questions, such as, are buttons and controls placed consistently? Is language consistent in labels and messages? Are we using full words or are we using cryptic abbreviations that only people inside our organization will understand? Okay, acronyms especially fall into this category because it's really easy and really tempting, to use all these terms that are very familiar to us, but you don't realize that most people have no idea what all those series of capital letters mean. So language has to be clear and consistent. Are font styles, images, graphic elements, color schemes all applied consistently across each screen? If we're using certain fonts for headlines, subheads, and body text, are we repeating that on every screen? Are we using the same kind of elements on each page? Are buttons and controls displayed consistently? Do they graphically look the same? Okay, is your primary action always treated the same way? Is it always a big red button? Or, do we get to screen 3 and all of a sudden my primary action is an orange circle? That's consistency. It's got to look the same as it did the last time I experienced it, so that I automatically recognize what it is and what I'm supposed to do with it. Related to that, do buttons or controls respond to user actions consistently in terms of the way they're displayed, appropriate context, appropriate functionality? If I click a button on one screen and the result is I'm taken to a new page, then the next time I click a button, that's what I'm going to expect to happen. If I click that button and I suddenly get a pop-up window, that's a disconnect in my understanding of how things work. And those are the types of things which confuse people. No matter how obvious the content may be that appears in that pop-up screen, the point is it didn't behave like it did the last time. It didn't behave the way the last one I used did. So every time that happens, every time there's an inconsistency like that, you introduce doubt in the user's mind as to whether they're using the system properly. When consistency is lacking in some way, we sort of see it in two ways. The first way is external inconsistency. And what that means is that different products within a single family of products reflect different design approaches. There's variations in the way that things appear and behave on the screen. For example, we have the iTunes app on the iPhone. If we're playing Trouble Comes Running by Spoon, our interface typically looks like this. We've got the time and duration of the song up above, and we've got our play controls at the bottom, and at the very bottom of the screen, we've got our volume control, okay? Pretty straightforward. However, when we go to the iPad, we suddenly get a different set of controls. It's actually hard to believe that these two variations came from the same company, because now at the top, I see my play controls, which used to be at the bottom. Okay, didn't see that one coming. Then I see that my sort of duration and time control is very different. I suddenly have volume control at the top instead of the bottom, and now I've got a whole new set of menu items happening down at the bottom of the screen. Now keep in mind that the iPhone came out years before the iPad did. So as a user, if you use me as an example, I've been using this phone for 4 years before I ever had a tablet. So I've got a certain expectation, a certain ingrained, reflexive, habitual way that I use this phone. When I play iTunes, I know where everything is. So I get the iPad, and everything's in a different place. And therefore, the first thing that happens is I'm aggravated because things aren't where I expect them to be. It's like walking into your house and finding that someone has rearranged all your furniture in the 2 hours that you were gone. Okay, it really is the same thing. It's a very frustrating, aggravating experience. Here's another example. If I look at my artist list on the iPhone, it looks like this. I've got a pretty simple list of things. I can scroll down it alphabetically, just like I can in my contacts on my phone. Again, paradigm I've been using for 4 years, makes total sense to me. On the iPad, however, all of a sudden it's all visual, and I have to suddenly change my orientation, and I have to choose a different viewpoint in order to get back to something resembling the display that I used to see before for the last 4 years. It's aggravating, and it's a radical change from what our existing mental model is. That's a poor design decision, okay? No matter how popular Apple may be, no matter how far on top of the design heap that they have sat for years, this is still a mistake. Introducing change in increments, never a bad idea. Wholesale change for the sake of changing with no prior precedent, with no bearing or relationship on what people's existing mental models are, bad decision, because all you're doing is you're frustrating people. And when they get frustrated and they have other choices regarding what they can use instead of your product, they will do so if you aggravate them, if you frustrate them, if you confuse them. Internal inconsistency is when different parts or different screens of the same application or the same system or the same site reflect very different design approaches. You're in one single site, one single system, and you get different results from doing different things. For example, this is the Goucher College website. Now, I land on this page, and the first thing I do within sort of 3 to 5 seconds is I get the lay of the land, okay? The navigation is up top. I've got a subnav here on my left. I got some photos. I got a tour, campus handbook, social media. Okay, great, I get it. But what I'm really here for is the alumni link because let's say I graduated from here. So at the far right, I find my alumni link, and I say, great, I'm going to click on that. And I get something completely different. This doesn't look anything like the website that I came from. So what will happen immediately in my mind, no matter how intelligent I may be, what will happen immediately is I will have a moment of, what just happened? Where am I? Was that right? Was that the right link? Did I click on the right thing? Because the established pattern, the established lay of the land that I just saw has radically changed. Everything shifted, everything moved. There is nothing familiar about this page that relates to where I came from. That's a disconnect. And what you have here is a team or a designer or somebody saying, well, you know, it's different. Alumni are a different audience group, and they should have their own corner of the universe. That's not inaccurate. But you have to, again, understand the psychology and even physiology to some degree behind how people make visual associations. To us, we are on a completely different website, and that's all there is to it. And that momentary, what the hell just happened feeling is enough to make us click the back button and wonder if that was the right link or not. The reason I give you this example is because I've seen people do it for years and years and years and years in usability tests. They go to a link, they click it, and if it doesn't look like what they expect, they hit the back button, they go back. Then they click the link again, and it's the same thing. And they go, wait a minute, maybe I did it wrong again. And they click the back button again and go back and try it again. Okay, that's not an accident. If 1 out of 300 people did it, it would be an accident. If 200 out of 300 people do it, there's something wrong, okay? And what's wrong is that there's a large degree of internal inconsistency. So that's something that you have to be aware of when you're designing various segments of a site. If you have a private section that's behind a login, you may say to yourself, well, it's a different part altogether, so it can look differently. No, it can't. It has to carry some of the same elements, the same structural organization. It has to carry some flavor of where the person came from in order for them to feel like they didn't just make a mistake. A certain degree of consistency is incredibly, incredibly important.